in northwestern Syria. The Trump administration, as far as I can tell, has settled on a Syria strategy that retains the #1 objective of the Obama administration: defeat ISIL. It parts from the Obama administration by saying, in effect, that the only way to keep ISIL, or something like it, dead is to get these Iranian-commanded militias out of the country. And, like the Obama administration, it wants a negotiated process under United Nations auspices in Geneva to address the underlying problem. An Assad family, an entourage that will not voluntarily yield power, cannot effectively share power, and will burn the country to the ground to keep its place. The administration hopes that Russia will cooperate in all of this. I think for Russia this presents a political problem of a domestic nature, and I'm sure our Russian guests know these issues better than I do. I think that President Vladimir Putin has no illusions at all about Bashar al-Assad. He knows the nature of his client. But Assad's political survival gives Mr. Putin a very, 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 very strong domestic political argument in Russia. The argument is that by saving Assad, we have saved the Syrian state. And by saving the Syrian state, we have restored Russia to great power status after decades of humiliation in a powerfully nationalistic place like Russia. This is a winning argument. It's an argument that beats criticisms about the economy's not too good, corruption may be out of control. This argument has been a winner for Mr. Putin. The administration's strategy has a few elements. It will support the stabilization of Syrian lands east of the Euphrates River that have been liberated from ISIL. It plans to keep American forces in place and is looking for burden-sharing partners willing to help rebuild areas that have been ruined combat operations. It will support Turkish efforts to prevent the regime and Russia from launching civilian terror attacks in northwestern Syria, an area that is already packed with displaced people. And it will support a UN-led negotiations process that it hopes will solidify ceasefire lines that already exist. The idea is to end the violence, get humanitarian assistance moving to those millions of Syrians who need it, turn the screws on the Iranian economy in part to demonstrate to Iranians the cost of this Syrian adventure, and begin talks that may eventually lead to the kind of political transition that can put Syria back together. This will not be an easy strategy for the administration to implement. Iran sees holding on to Syria as a national security imperative. The Trump administration is not seeking war with Iran in Syria. Neither is it seeking violent regime change. Its main goal, it bears repeating, is to beat ISIL and keep it dead. It very much sees this goal in terms of defending the American homeland from the kinds of operations that terrorize Paris and Brussels, where it parts company with its predecessor, the Obama administration, is on the issue of Iran. President Obama wanted, more than anything else in the Middle East, a nuclear agreement with Iran. He believed that such an agreement would prevent war and eventually make Iran a good neighbor in the Middle East. He knew how vital Bashar al-Assad's survival was to Iran. He feared, incorrectly I think, that if he took steps to defend Syrian civilians from mass murder, if he took steps senior administration officials and State Department diplomats were begging him to take, he might alienate Iran and ruin the nuclear talks. When he decided to intervene against ISIL in eastern Syria, President Obama reportedly took the extraordinary step of assuring Iran's supreme leader in writing that Bashar al-Assad would not be on the bullseye of American military strikes. Like many aspects of the Obama administration's approach to Syria, this assurance had unintended but predictably disastrous consequences. It told Assad he could do what he wanted to his own people and not worry about the United States exacting a price. And that's exactly what he did and what he continues to do. Obviously, the Trump administration is not so solicitous of Iranian feelings. Still, it's not at all clear to me how it intends to get Iran out of Syria. It's not at all clear to me that the Trump administration has the stamina to outlast Iran in Syria. The real measure of administration seriousness and commitment will be seen in the lands liberated from ISIL. My own view, and this is where I'll conclude, my own view is that if we focus successfully on eastern Syria with its oil and agricultural resources as a model of how Syria could operate, and if we exact a price of the Assad regime in the West, anytime it embarks on mass homicide, we can prevent what most Americans would agree is the worst from happening in Syria. The definition of worst would be Syria as a political Death Star, hatching and hosting transnational terrorists for as far as the eye can see. It is this prospect, I think, that ought to convince all of us, not just those of us who have a special appreciation for the place, that Syria really does matter. For those of us already possessing a keen appreciation for a beautiful country and a wonderful people, unspeakable horrors have already occurred, crimes that have to date avoided punishment. But we can compound this disaster exponentially and perhaps even bring elements of it to the United States if we decide that Syria, a faraway place with lots of problems, simply does not matter. What happens there does not stay there. And in the 21st century, oceans are neither wide enough nor deep enough to protect us from what might emerge. No one is calling for a second Iraq. No one is calling for invasion, occupation, stabilization of liberated territory, protection of defenseless civilians, and peace talks, producing political transition toward the consent of the governed in Syria. These are the steps that can keep Americans safe from the worst consequences of a failed state. Thanks so much for your attention.